I opened my eyes in the ICU. Tubes in my arms. Beeping overhead. My son was there. But he wasn't with me. Just standing by the wall, scrolling through his phone. Didn't even look up when the nurse said, "She's awake." Didn't even flinch. She asked if I wanted family notified. I said no. He's already here. He never touched my hand. Never asked if I was scared. Or cold. Or alive. That was the moment I knew. That's fine. I don't need visitors. I've already updated the paperwork. It's strange what you miss when life goes quiet. The sound of keys in a door that used to open by itself. A half-cooked pot of lentils you made out of habit. Even when no one was coming to dinner. I still made his favorite rice pudding every Sunday. Still used his childhood bowl. Still set the spoon beside it like he'd just overslept. I kept that old clock he hated. Said the ticking drove him crazy. But it ticked in the background like a heartbeat. At least something in the house still kept rhythm. After his father passed, it was just the two of us. We had this unspoken agreement. I'd carry the weight of the world if he promised to chase the sky. And for a while he did. I sold my jewelry to help pay for his out-of-state tuition. Took a night job at the library to cover rent when he needed help with his first apartment. Never once asked for it back. Every birthday I wrote him letters. Not cards, letters. The kind you fold carefully and sign with love. I don't know if he read them. But I know they disappeared from his mail slot. When he got his first job, I made a quilt from all his baby clothes. Wrapped it in tissue paper. Left it outside his apartment. The next time I visited, it was folded in a closet. Still in the wrapping. Dust on the top. I told myself it was fine. He was busy. He was trying. He was just young. But the silences got longer. The thank yous shorter. I'd send a text and get a thumbs up 3 days later. Left voicemails that went unanswered. Told the women at the library he was just private. A good son. Quiet but good. Then I got sick. Nothing loud. Just fatigue that wouldn't leave, bruises that didn't make sense, and weight I didn't mean to lose. The doctor said it could be managed, just some treatments, some rest. I told my son, but softened the words. Didn't want to sound dramatic. He said, "Oh, that sucks. Keep me posted." I smiled at the phone, then set it down like it had burned me. He didn't come for the first round of treatment. I told the nurse he was out of town. He wasn't. I saw his photos online. At a friend's wedding. Laughing. Arm around someone I didn't recognize. But I kept his chair ready in the hospital room. Just in case. The house was still full of him. His old drawings pinned behind the pantry door. His height marks scratched in the hallway frame. A soccer medal he forgot still hanging on the lamp. I dusted around it, careful not to shift its angle. Sometimes I talked to him out loud. Told him about the garden. The neighbor's cat. The way the rain sounded heavier this year. Sometimes I imagined him answering back. He never asked if I needed help with groceries. Never offered to drive me to treatment. But I kept defending him. He's got a lot on his plate. He's probably tired. He's a good boy. Just busy. I was never truly lonely. Just quietly replaced. The neighbor's daughter came by sometimes. Just to sit. Just to talk. Brought me tea and almond biscuits from the bakery her mother liked. She listened when I rambled. Laughed at my bad jokes. Asked questions about my past like it mattered. Once she picked up the quilt I made for him and said, "This is beautiful." Who was it for? I told her. Someone who doesn't know what love costs. The light in the living room changed with the seasons. I'd sit there at dusk, staring at that photo of the three of us, me, my husband, and my little boy with dimples and soft eyes. The photo was starting to fade. Or maybe I was. One afternoon, I found the ring. The one my husband gave me before we were married. I'd strung it on a thin gold chain after he passed. Wore it under my shirt, close to my skin. I held it between my fingers and whispered. I did everything I could. The house was quiet but not empty. Full of ghosts and things I never said. I made myself 1 cup of tea. Always one. And when the kettle whistled, I'd look toward the door. He never came. It started with soil. Damp under my fingernails. I had gone outside that morning to prune the rosemary, just like always. Something in the air felt heavier. like the day had decided not to lift. I was on my knees in the garden when the pain began, slow, then sharp, radiating through my ribs. I tried to stand. The world tilted. Next thing I knew, I was in the back of an ambulance. They told me I had collapsed. I told them I'd just gotten tired. At the hospital, I gave them his number. He didn't pick up. They called again. I heard the nurse whisper, "She's stable." "Yes, ICU." I stayed awake, waiting to hear his voice. I got his ringtone instead. When he finally came, he didn't ask what happened. Didn't ask if I'd been scared. Just stood there with that permanent look of distraction, like I was a loading screen he didn't have time to wait for. He took a call. Right there, beside my bed. Didn't step outside. Didn't lower his voice. I heard him laugh. He said, "Yeah, I'll check the place out. Her house'll probably hit probate soon anyway." I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. Just to make the world go dark for a second. Just long enough to erase his voice. The nurse came in. Took my vitals. Said something cheerful. I nodded like I was still here. He was tapping on his phone. Responding to messages. Forwarding emails. I looked down at my hand. The one that used to hold his through thunder and nightmares and the first day of school. It rested limp on the blanket. Unnoticed. He didn't take it. Didn't even glance. That's when I saw it. His laptop bag had slipped open beneath the chair. Inside a folder. Blue plastic. And sticking out of it, my handwriting. I couldn't see the full page. Just the edge. Just enough to recognize my signature. A date. My will. The original copy I'd given to my lawyer 5 years ago. Why was it with him? He hadn't asked for it. I hadn't sent it. I blinked slowly. Focused on the foredrip. Counted the seconds between beeps on the heart monitor. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. But I knew the way my own name curved in ink. I knew the way I looped the Y in my middle name. It was mine. And it was in his hands. The nurse asked, "Do you want to see more family?" I said, "No. He's already here." He looked up then. Briefly. As if startled by the word family. Then back to his phone. I felt something slide inside me. A slow, silent shift. Like a door closing that had been left open too long. The room didn't change. But everything inside me did. He said, "I'll bring her some soup or something later. I've got a showing." A showing. I knew then he wasn't talking about the house he was buying. He was selling. Mine. Maybe not yet. Maybe just scoping. But in his mind, I was already gone. He left without touching me. Not a kiss on the forehead. Not a hand on my shoulder. Just the quick sound of rubber soles and the elevator door closing. I stared at the ceiling. Counted the tiles. Waited for the tears to come. They didn't. Just a stillness. Just a clarity I hadn't felt in years. That night I turned my face to the window. The city lights flickered behind the fog. A nurse walked past, humming. The monitor kept time. I thought of that garden. The rosemary I hadn't finished trimming. The soil still under my nails. The last thing I had touched before this chair, this tube, this betrayal. And I thought, he is not my reason anymore. He's my reminder. A quiet knock on the wall from the room next door broke the silence. Then it returned. Heavy. Total. The room was silent. But everything inside me was screaming. The strange thing is, it wasn't just the hospital. That wasn't the beginning. That was the confirmation. The hurt had started much earlier, slow, scattered, quiet. Like drips in a sink you learn to live with. Little things. Moments that didn't seem worth a fight. Like when I sent him a photo of the roses blooming in the backyard. The ones he planted when he was 12. No reply. Not even a heart. Or the birthday call that came 2 days late, mid-meal, with chewing in the background. "Hey, I didn't forget. Just been slammed." I said, "That's okay." Even meant it. Or thought I did. He used to send me little souvenirs from his travels. Keychains, magnets, postcards. The last one I got was 5 years ago. A blurry photo of a beer glass with the words "Cheers from Prague." No message. Just that. I still kept it on the fridge. One time, I bought him a sweater. Not fancy, just warm, soft, blue like his eyes when he was little. I remember wrapping it carefully. I even ironed the tissue paper. He opened it, said, "Oh cool," and left it on the table. The next time I visited, it was folded on a chair in the guest room. Tag still on. I told myself he probably had too many sweaters. Another time, I sent him an old photo of his father holding him in the snow. One of those grainy prints that smell like memory. No reply. Weeks later, I saw it stuffed in a drawer near his kitchen, bent in the corner. And yet, every time he called, late, distracted, half listening, I still smiled at the sound of his voice. I told myself he's busy. That's just life. He doesn't mean to be distant. He's tired. He's trying. I repeated those lines so often, I almost believed them. Then came the day I mailed him my wedding ring. Not the gold one I wore daily. The silver one, my husband's. The one he wore on a chain under his uniform every day of our marriage. I wanted our son to have it. I thought it was time. I wrapped it in a small box, with a handwritten letter tucked inside. 3 weeks passed. Nothing. Finally, I asked on the phone if it had arrived. He said, "Oh yeah." Meant to ask, "Do you want me to keep it in a safe or something?" No mention of the letter. No word about what it meant. Just logistics. Like I'd mailed him a set of keys or a receipt. I hung up, sat down in the kitchen, and stared at the teapot. The one that used to steam every morning when he was in high school. The one he'd joked was older than cable television. I hadn't used it in weeks. The water in the kettle had gone stale. But I boiled it anyway. He used to call me Mama when he was tired. Whisper it like a secret at bedtime. Hold my hand during thunderstorms. Now he called me Ma. Short. Cold. Like a contact saved on speed dial. The neighbor's daughter noticed once. She was helping me carry groceries and saw my screen light up. "Ma Sal," she said. "I still call mine Mommy. Even now. She'd kill me if I didn't." I laughed. But it stung. There were little scenes that looped like echoes. Me bringing soup to his apartment when he had the flu. Him sitting on the couch, not looking up when I came in. A pile of laundry in the corner. A woman's sweater. He said she wasn't staying over. I didn't ask. Another. Christmas. I brought homemade cookies. He opened the door in a rush, said, "You didn't have to." I watched them go uneaten. Found them in the trash the next morning. Still in the tin. And another. He texted me. "Can you Venmo me $200? Need it fast. We'll explain later." I sent it within the hour. No explanation ever came. But I never asked. Never wanted to seem difficult. That was the word his last girlfriend used in passing. We were at a brunch, an awkward one. She said, "You know how some moms are just difficult?" Then laughed. He didn't correct her. Didn't say I wasn't. Didn't say anything at all. And I just smiled. Because it was easier. Because it's what we do when we don't want to lose what little we still have. We smile. We excuse. We fold ourselves smaller. Blend into the wallpaper of their lives. I once told my doctor that my chest hurt sometimes at night. Like something heavy sat on it. He asked if it was anxiety. I said, "Maybe. Or maybe I'm grieving someone who's still alive." He looked at me like he wanted to say more. But didn't. Just wrote something in his chart and handed me a prescription. I never filled it. Didn't need pills. I needed someone to see me. To ask me something real. To remember who I was before I became someone's afterthought. I stood in front of the mirror one night and whispered, "Do you even know me anymore?" There was no answer. Just my own reflection. Just silence. He dropped me off like I was an errand. Didn't park. Didn't help with my bag. Just popped the trunk and tapped the steering wheel while I reached for my own cane. I paused by the passenger door waiting, hoping. He rolled down the window. Said, "Call the nurse next time. I've got stuff lined up." Then drove off. No wave. No backward glance. I stood there in the cold, coat undone, key trembling in my hand. The lock jammed. I jiggled it the way his father used to. The door opened like it didn't recognize me anymore. Inside the air was still. That kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just abandoned. I placed my purse on the counter and saw the mail piled up. Some opened. Most not. Then I saw it. A torn envelope. Crumpled. Familiar handwriting. It was the letter I wrote him years ago, tucked inside the quilt I made from his baby clothes. I had written, "If you ever feel lost, remember. This was stitched by hands that knew your first heartbeat." He never mentioned it. Now it sat in the trash. Wrinkled. Coffee-stained. Unread. I pulled it out and smoothed it with my palm. The ink had blurred, but I could still see the word heartbeat. Funny how it didn't feel like mine anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind made the windows groan. I got up and made tea. There was dust inside the cup I always saved for him. I rinsed it, set it back on the shelf. Not because he'd use it, but because I still hadn't learned how to stop hoping. I sat on the couch and let the quiet crawl over me. Pulled an old album from the drawer. His baby pictures. Soft cheeks. White eyes. A smile that used to belong to me. One photo. Him asleep on my chest, barely a week old. His fingers curled in my shirt like I was the whole world. I remember that day. My husband took the photo and said, "You're the home he'll never forget." But he did. He forgot the stories I told when he was sick. The way I sat by his bed during every fever. The hand I held through broken hearts and scraped knees. He forgot who made him brave. Who made him whole. And just like that, the ache spilled over. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a silent collapse. Like something inside me crumpled. I let the album fall shut. Let the tears run without wiping them away. They didn't burn. They didn't even sting. They just fell. Like rain that knew it was overdue. Have you ever remembered something small? Just when everything felt like it was falling apart. I did. I remembered the way he used to pronounce spaghetti as baschetti. The way he'd tug my sleeve when he was scared and say, "Mama's here." The way he once made a drawing of our family in crayon. It used to hang on the fridge. I went to the cabinet where I kept old things. Cards, letters, scraps of time. It was still there. Folded. Faded. But real. I held it for a while. Then slowly, gently, I placed it in the trash. Not out of anger. Just truth. It didn't belong on my fridge anymore. I looked around the house. Nothing had changed. But I had. Something in me broke that night. And maybe it needed to. Maybe not all cracks are bad. Some let the light in. Some let you see what you've been too afraid to face. I stood by the window until morning. Watched the light turn the floor gold. Then whispered, like a prayer. Empty. Forgotten. Perfect. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. Didn't send a dramatic text or write a long letter demanding answers. Instead, I made a cup of tea. The kind I used to make for him after school. Chamomile with too much honey. This time, I made it for myself. Sat by the kitchen window and sipped it slowly, like every swallow was a sentence I no longer had to say. Then I got up and walked to the drawer beneath the phone. Took out the file I hadn't opened in years. Medical papers. House deed. My living will. Everything with his name on it. Everything I once gave him without hesitation. One by one, I crossed them out. Not in anger. Not in haste. Just correction. The way you erase a wrong answer on a test after finally understanding the question. Then I called Mr. Delaney, my lawyer of nearly 30 years. He answered on the second ring, like always. "Good morning, Mrs. Ray." "Morning, John. I'd like to make some changes." No questions. Just silence. Then the sound of his pen clicking into readiness. "I want to remove my son's name from all inheritance documents. Financials. Property. Medical authority. Everything." Still no questions. Just, understood. I exhaled. It felt like the first breath I'd taken all year. Next, I called the bank. Had my accounts adjusted. Changed my emergency contact. They asked who should be listed instead. I gave them the name of the neighbor's daughter. She checks on me. Knows where the spare key is. The woman on the line paused, then said, "That's very thoughtful of her." I smiled. She's thoughtful. Period. Then I stood. Opened the hallway closet. Took out the cardboard box I hadn't touched in a decade. Inside was everything from my husband's funeral. The flag. The guest book. The sympathy cards. And tucked beneath it all, the deed to the house. Still in both our names. I had never updated it. Never felt the need. Until now. I opened the safe in the back room and placed the deed inside. Locked it. Turned the dial until the click felt like closure. Then came the silent scene. No words. No warning. Just me, in front of the hall mirror, wearing the gold chain with his father's wedding ring. The same one I hadn't taken off in years. I reached behind my neck, unclasped it, let it fall into my palm. The weight was heavier than I remembered. I walked to the bedroom, opened my jewelry box, and placed it inside. Didn't close the lid. Just let it rest there, like a story that had found its final page. Next, I walked to the front door. Took the small wooden plaque that hung there since we moved in. The rays, Daniel, Maria and Eli. My husband. Me. Our son. I pried it off the nail. Flipped it over. Wrote a single line on the back in pencil. Once. Then I left it on the kitchen table. Not angry. Just done. I didn't slam the door when I walked out. I just closed it. Finally. Outside, the sun was soft against my skin. The garden needed tending. The rosemary still bent where I'd collapsed weeks ago. I knelt beside it and pressed my hands into the earth. Felt something living move beneath the soil. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt rooted, strong, useful, alive. I didn't need permission. I didn't need apology. I just needed space to grow again. Later that evening, I passed the neighbor's daughter on the sidewalk. She waved. You doing okay? I smiled. I'm getting there. She handed me a paper bag. Almond biscuits. I got too many. I nodded and took them. Didn't cry. Didn't say thank you more than once. Just held the bag close and kept walking. Inside, I placed them on the table beside the removed name plaque. 2 symbols. One of what had been taken. The other of what had been given freely. The phone rang once that night. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was on the other end. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Been a crazy week. Call me when you can. I pressed delete. Didn't listen twice. Didn't save it. Some things don't need remembering. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? And then one day you realize. Peace never asked you to be silent. It just asked you to stop begging for noise. It came on a Tuesday. Gray light through the curtains. Rain tapping the window like an old regret. I had just finished folding the linens when the doorbell rang. It was Beverly, my friend from church. Retired paralegal. Sharp as ever. The kind of woman who reads estate law for fun. She held a folder in one hand and her umbrella in the other. Said, "Can I sit?" I nodded. Something in her face told me this wasn't a social visit. She opened the folder. Papers. Official ones. I wasn't snooping, she said. I was helping Sandra's daughter at the courthouse. I saw your name in the petition log. I stared at her. What kind of petition? Her eyes softened, but her voice didn't. Guardianship. The word dropped like lead in my chest. From who? She didn't answer. Just pushed the paper toward me. There it was. My name. My age. The diagnosis he listed. Possible early-stage dementia, confusion, inability to manage financial matters. Filed by my son. I didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Just read it again. Possible. Early. Confusion. The same son who forgot my birthday. The same son who never asked how I got to treatment. Or if I could stand without help. The same son who stood at the edge of my ICU bed like I was a number on a chart. He wanted control. Not of me. Of what I had. I turned the page. Attached was a photocopy of my will. Except, it wasn't the real one. It was a version I never signed. Names added. Names removed. The neighbor's daughter was missing. My church fund donation erased. Instead, there was a clause about executor discretion. He had typed it. Forged my name at the bottom. Not well, but just enough to pass unless someone looked close. Beverly said quietly. They don't always investigate when it's family. That's the part that breaks you. I felt the air pull from the room. I thought of the moment in the ICU. The glimpse of that document sticking out of his laptop bag. It was my will. But it wasn't mine anymore. He had taken my handwriting. My wishes. My final voice. And rewritten it like a shopping list. He didn't just forget me. He erased me. There was no yelling. No sobbing. Just me, staring at the floor with the quiet realization that I had raised a man who believed I was worth more dead than alive. And not because of grief. Because of convenience. Because a house is easier to liquidate than a mother is to love. I walked to the back room. Unlocked the safe. Inside was the real will. The one I'd written by hand years ago after my husband passed. The one with ink stains and margin notes and a PS that said, "Don't be afraid to start over." I held it in my hands. It was still here. Still valid. Still mine. My signature real. My voice unaltered. The truth untouched. Beverly looked at me. "I can help you file a formal notice. Revoke any pending petitions." I shook my head. No need. I'm not giving him the chance. I folded the real will. Slipped it into a new envelope. Wrote today's date on the seal. Then I walked to the kitchen drawer. Pulled out the worn manila folder where I kept stamps and old receipts. And removed every paper with his name on it. Trash. One by one. Beverly stood, touched my arm. "You sure you're all right?" I nodded. "Now I am." After she left, I sat in the living room. Tea cooling beside me. Rain still falling. I reached for the photo album I hadn't opened in months. Found a picture of him at graduation. Cap tilted, smiling. Arms around both me and his father's memorial photo. He looked proud. So did I. I traced the outline of his face. Whispered, "Where did you go?" And then I saw it. The drawing. It had been slipped inside the back cover of the album. The same one I thought I'd thrown out weeks ago. Crayon lines. Stick figures. A house with a sun above it. He had drawn himself with a cape. Underneath it, he'd written in crooked letters, "I will protect you forever." I stared at those words until my eyes blurred. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back. Not on the fridge. Not in the trash. But in a small wooden box beside the quilt I once made. Not because I forgave him. Not because it excused what he tried to do. But because I needed to remember. There was a time he meant it. Before greed grew larger than love. Before silence replaced safety. Before the boy I raised became the man I didn't recognize. The next morning I made a list. Not a to-do list. A to-choose list. There's a difference. One is about survival. The other is about living. At the top, I wrote, "Things that are mine, and will remain so." Then I put on my coat, stepped into the cool air, and walked to the small law office 2 blocks from the bakery. I handed the sealed will to the clerk at the front desk. She said, "Would you like a copy for yourself?" I shook my head. "No need. I know what it says." She smiled. "Would you like us to notify the previous executor?" I paused, then said softly, "No. Let the silence do that." I walked out lighter than I had in months. Next stop, the garden. The rosemary had begun to stand upright again. The ground was dry but forgiving. I pressed my fingers into the soil and began planting the marigold seeds the neighbor's daughter gave me last spring. She said they were good for the soul. Stubborn little flowers, she'd told me, bloom even in places they're not supposed to. I smiled at the memory. Afterward, I went inside and pulled the quilt from the storage bin. The one stitched from his baby clothes. I held it close one last time. Felt the softness of each patch. The threads of lullabies and lost afternoons. Then I walked across the street. Knocked on the neighbor's door. Her daughter answered, flour on her cheek from baking. Before she could speak, I held it out to her. "I made this a long time ago. It was meant for someone else, but I think it was always yours." She didn't ask questions. She just took it like it mattered. And I knew she would never let it gather dust. That night, I went through the rest of the house. Removed old reminders that no longer served love. A framed letter from his college graduation. Tucked away. The world's best mom mug he gave me at 12. Moved to the back of the cabinet. I wasn't angry. I was curating. Editing. Keeping only what still held truth. In the hallway closet, I found a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside was the tea kettle. The one he hated, called that ancient whistle trap. I had replaced it with a newer electric one years ago. But somehow, I had kept this old thing. Dented. Stained. But it still worked. I filled it. Lit the stove. Waited. When it whistled, I didn't flinch. I smiled. I poured myself a cup. Sat down in the armchair by the window. The one I'd avoided since he stopped visiting. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting. I was resting. Choosing. Becoming. Later that week, I made one more decision. I walked into the local community center and asked if they still needed volunteers. The woman at the front desk blinked. For which program? All of them, I said. She laughed. Well, we can definitely use help with the children's art classes. I smiled. I've got crayons and patience. That Sunday, I stood in a small white room, handing out paper and listening to tiny voices create entire universes with glitter and glue. One little boy came up and said, "Can I make a card for my mom?" I nodded. He asked how to spell beautiful. I wrote it out for him. Slowly. Carefully. Then on a whim I added, "Don't forget to tell her. Every chance you get." He grinned. "Okay." And ran off. I stood there, hand still holding the pen, and felt something shift. Not a break. A return. A quiet rebuilding. Have you ever given something sacred away and felt more whole because of it? I did. And it didn't feel like loss. It felt like truth. I walked home that evening with a paper sunflower a child had made for me. I placed it on the mantel, right where his photo used to be. Not out of spite. Just honesty. I looked around the house. Still the same walls. Still the same creaking floorboards and stubborn light switch in the hallway. But everything inside them was mine now. Not inherited. Not loaned. Not wished for. Claimed. Chosen. It was nearly 2 months later when I saw his name light up my phone. First once. Then twice. Then a message. "Can we talk? I'll be by this weekend. Just want to check on you." I didn't answer. Didn't delete it either. I wanted to see what apology would look like when it was too late. That Saturday around 3 p.m., his car pulled up outside the house. Same car I helped him buy. I watched from the kitchen window as he hesitated at the curb. He looked thinner. Or maybe just smaller than I remembered. The garden was in full bloom now, marigolds bright, rosemary upright. He looked at it like he didn't recognize the place. I didn't go to the door when he rang the bell. Let it echo. Let him wait. Eventually, I opened it. Not wide. Just enough. He stood there with a plastic grocery bag, store-bought cookies and a single bottle of apple juice. "Hi," he said. "You look good." I didn't respond. Just held the door. Didn't invite him in. He shifted. I heard from someone at the courthouse. They said you made some changes." I said nothing. His eyes darted to the window, where the old plaque used to hang. Gone. He cleared his throat. "Look, I didn't mean for things to get messy. I was just trying to be prepared. You weren't well. I didn't know how bad it would get." I raised one eyebrow. He continued. "I thought maybe we could sit. Talk things through. Fix this." I nodded slowly, then opened the drawer beside me and pulled out the forged will. Folded. Creased. Stained slightly from when Beverly first showed it to me. I handed it to him. Didn't say a word. He took it with shaky hands. Unfolded it. Recognized it instantly. The air between us shifted. His mouth opened, ready to explain. I closed the door. Not with force. Just finality. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the glass between us. Calm. Upright. Whole. He stood there for a while. Bag still in his hand. Looking like a child who just realized the game had ended. Eventually he walked back to his car. Didn't look up again. I went to the kitchen. Took the store cookies from the step. Threw them in the trash. Then sat in my armchair. Tea warm in my palms. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. Didn't feel shame. Didn't even feel anger. Just freedom. Have you ever watched someone try to return, only to realize you had already left? Emotionally. Spiritually. Entirely. He didn't know it, but I had buried the old version of myself weeks ago. The woman who waited. Who hoped. Who made excuses. She had planted marigolds in her place. And they were blooming. I heard a sound from the back porch. The neighbor's daughter had come over with fresh bread. She waved through the screen and pointed to the oven. "Still warm," she called. I smiled. "Come in." As she stepped inside, I saw it clearly. He had walked away from something real and tried to come back to a version of me that no longer existed. For a moment, I pitied him. Then I remembered who I was. Peace didn't arrive with music. No bright sunrise or letter of apology. It came in the middle of a Tuesday, when the laundry finished early, when the kettle didn't whistle. It just simmered quietly, and I sat still enough to hear my own breath. I poured tea into the old cup, the one I used to reserve for him. Blue porcelain, chipped at the rim. I held it with both hands and drank without waiting for company. No knock. No phone call. No obligation. Just morning light spilling across the kitchen table. I opened the window, let the breeze stir the curtains and carry out the dust of old expectations. There was no more plaque on the door. No framed photo on the shelf. No name on the paperwork that didn't belong. Just my name. My choices. My peace. I walked outside barefoot. The rosemary had thickened. The marigolds turned their faces toward the sun like they knew they were wanted now. The garden didn't ask who stayed. It bloomed anyway. Inside, I took down the mirror that hung in the hallway. Behind it, the faint outline of the height chart he'd scratched as a boy. I stared at it for a long time, then painted over it. Slowly, with one even stroke. Some things don't need preserving. Some memories are only wounds with frames around them. I didn't feel guilt. I felt grace. I returned the old wedding ring to its box, placed it in the back of the drawer, behind receipts and forgotten pens. Not hidden, just retired. I took the folded drawing, the one with crayon capes and shaky promises, and placed it in a small wooden chest. Tied it closed with twine. Set it in the attic, beside the quilt he never claimed. Not out of sorrow, out of ceremony, because I believe in keeping what matters, but not in pretending it still fits. I wrote one last letter. Didn't sign it. Didn't address it. It read, "You were loved." And that's not something I ever needed permission to take back. I tucked it inside a book of poetry and donated it to the church library. Maybe someone would find it. Maybe not. Either way, it was no longer mine to carry. That afternoon, I walked to the riverbank. Wore the soft gray sweater my husband once said made me look like a storm cloud ready to break open. In my hand, a single brass key, the one to the safe that held the real will. The last symbol of control I had ever given away without question. I held it between my fingers, felt its weight, thought of all the hands it never should have passed through. Then, with a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding, I let it go, watched it sink into the current, swallowed by something older and freer than betrayal. The ripples spread outward, like forgiveness I didn't have to offer aloud. On the way home, I passed the bakery. The neighbor's daughter waved me in. I bought 2 almond biscuits. One for me, one for her. We sat under the awning as it started to rain, warm and steady. She asked how I was doing. I looked at the street, the sky, the crumbs on my napkin, and said, I feel like myself again. Not someone's mother, not someone's duty, just Maria. She smiled. It suits you. That night, I turned on the porch light, not to guide anyone home, but because I liked how it looked when the wind moved the branches. I sat in my chair, the one I used to avoid, with my feet up, a blanket over my knees, a book in my lap I'd already read twice. And for the first time, I didn't need the ending to change. I was the ending. I didn't need to be called, didn't need to be missed, didn't need to be found, because I had never been lost. They just stopped looking. But I never stopped being. I was never the echo. I was the voice they tried to silence. The key I never gave became the one that freed me.